Morning light through the window pane, coffee steaming, no rush, no lane. World's been shouting all night long. I pour a cup, let the silence talk. I didn't leave angry, didn't storm the door. I just stepped sideways away from the roar. Pull up a chair, let the clock unwind. This isn't breaking news, it's breaking the grind. They sell fear by the hour, package rage by the pound. Every screen's got an opinion, every voice trying to sound like they know what's coming, like they've cracked the code. But the loudest ones panic when you step off the road. I've seen cycles repeat, watch them rise, watch them fall. Empires shouting forever right before they stall. So I sip and I watch, let the headlines fight. Truth don't need a megaphone, it waits out the night. They want speed, they want fire, they want sides, they want lines, they want heroes and villains every damn time. But life ain't a headline, ain't red versus blue. It's quiet decisions people never review. Yeah, yeah, they want me. Loud? Nah, freedom's calm. It's knowing when to walk while the others all run. I'm not late to the party, I just left it early. Seen how it ends, same mess, same worry. Take a breath, let the cup cool down. The world will keep spinning without your sound. We'll be right here when the dust don't fly. Coffee on the table, morning in the sky. This is coffee time, Liz. No need to run. We'll talk again when the day's begun.
Welcome back to the channel, GranColombia, and welcome to another Coffee Time special edition here on this Wednesday morning in Armenia, Quindío, Colombia. Today I'm going to take you through what it's like to be me. But along the way, I have this fascinating thing I've learned about Colombia that through all these years, I never heard a word about it. But it all started of checking out a national park. And this is a national park that's huge, but you can't go in there. And so I was curious about this, so I started doing some digging. And what I found was shocking. And so what I'm going to do is take you through my thoughts, but I'm going to talk about the specific topics. But through the course of it, you're going to see what it's like to be inside my head. I start off with the park, and then I stumble on some more information, and then some more information, and then more information. And then I got to this golden nugget. And when I say the Amazon arc, I am not kidding. I'm not playing with words here. Well, you'll see. You'll see as I get to it. And I do have a video of the park. It's actually little clips that I located, and I put them together, and it's about 5 minutes, but there's specific things in there. I think it's worth the time. So after I get started, I'll show that, and well, you'll see as we go. So let's just get into it, because I want to tell you this story today. This is something I stumbled into while I was reading. And once I saw this connection I'm about to show you, I started obsessing. I don't know. I don't know if this is unique to me, if it's like some illness I have. I'm curious. Do any of you do the same thing? 50 at 50. Good morning. How you doing? Thank you for being here. Sunday, I'm going to talk about Rumble's new requirements, and they're just, I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever reach them, but I'll hold off till Sunday for that. So this all started with Chiribiquete. If you live in Colombia and you follow natural history at all, you've probably heard the name, or at least you know something about the Chiribiquete National Park. It's in the southeast of the country. It's deep in the Amazon basin. It's one of the oldest geological formations on the planet, and it contains the largest collection of pre-Columbian rock art anywhere in the Americas. Of course, it was declared a UNESCO site. Seems like everything is, which sounds impressive until you learn that most of it in this part, it's just completely off limits. And it has nothing to do with the government trying to protect the artifacts, because that's what I thought, but it's actually because there's people living there. So these indigenous groups that live in that region have had virtually no contact with the modern world. Now, to clarify, around the edges, there's some tribes who have contact with the outer world. And as a matter of fact, they do some tourist stuff in their little corner, and that's all allowed. It's their land. So they dress up, they dress the way they do, but it's almost like they're corrupted. So it's all a money-making thing, and there's a lot of things that have become commercial about it. Some of the tribes didn't like being paraded out like zoo animals, and so they decided not to do it anymore. So they no longer permit tourists to come and gawk at them. But you go a few miles deeper in, and the Amazon is huge. Well, I'll show you on a map. But you go a few miles deeper in, and there are tribes that have never had any contact with the outside world. Now, they've seen maybe a plane fly over, something of that sort, but no contact. They've chosen to remain outside of any possible contact deliberately for generations. They live there. They don't want to leave there. They don't want to know what's out there. And Colombian law respects that choice. So large sections of that territory are formally designated as protected zones for uncontacted people. And outsiders, including researchers, are legally prohibited from entering. Now, having said that, there was a research group a few years ago that was permitted to go into the section of the cave art. I'm going to show you. That'll be in the video. And they were able to do ground penetration. They did all kinds of measurements and carbon dating materials and all kinds of stuff. But that was like there's your shot. That's it. You're done. So that was allowed one time. So here we are in 2026 with smartphones in our pockets and satellite internet. And there's human beings living in that jungle the way their ancestors lived 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 years ago. They're not lost or waiting to be discovered. They're choosing this. So I was doing some research on these national parks, and this caught my attention. And then I just kept reading, and things got stranger. So let me show you. Bear with me on this. It's 5 minutes. As I said, it's clips of the park. So then alone, it'll be interesting. It was the best video I could find of the they call it cave art. It wasn't actually in rock paintings, we'll say. So check this out. Chiribiquete. So that represents the park and the protected zone. This is approximately ballpark of the size of the Amazon, and there's a park within it. Yeah, they're clips. I didn't edit the music or anything. I just clipped them up. So there again is the park. Find some very interesting information about these paintings, but I'm not going to go into that today because I've got this arc thing is fascinating, and that's what today's about.
en el corazón del Amazonas colombiano se encuentra el Parque Nacional Natural Serranía de Chiribiquete, guardián de una historia de miles de años que hasta hace poco empieza a ser contada. Un lugar apenas conocido que resguarda la mirada de nuestros antepasados y la forma como entendían al mundo, a través de más de 70.000 pinturas rupestres de alto valor arqueológico que podrían tener miles de años de antigüedad. Estas pinturas están preservadas en uno de los afloramientos rocosos más antiguos del continente, el macizo guayanés.
Okay, I think you get the idea. And just to go a little bit further on the theme of going off into a rabbit hole, you see the those paintings there, they're red, but there's also some that are in black. And so I was kind of curious, so I started looking at why is that the case? And it said, well, they're actually having trouble dating it because the black is done by an organic material, but the red is done by an inorganic material. And so they can't really date that. And there's a natural process that as that coloring seeps into the rock, which is partly sandstone, it's a quartz sandstone. There's a chemical that kind of weeps back out of the rock and coats the painting, and it can protect it for tens of thousands of years, which, okay, that was fascinating. But then I was wondering, I know for a fact that indigenous people in the Amazon will paint themselves all over the place, and they use a red dye that they get out of a fruit. And so I'm digging, it's like, wait a minute, they're saying it's inorganic. Why wouldn't they use what they use on their own bodies? And so I dig into that and I find out that, yeah, the fruit and all of that, except the sun damages it, and within months it'll fade out and can't be seen. And they knew that, doing these things for generations. And so they use a rock hematite that basically it's an iron oxide, like rust, and they use that red instead of the red. Anyway, I just keep running into these things that take me off in different directions. But now I want to talk about the Maloca. So as I'm looking into these groups, and not just the uncontacted ones, but the broader indigenous people of that region, they've been studied by anthropologists for decades. And I learned about what they build. Now the center, and that's changed somewhat over time, although aerial views of places that are uncontacted, that nobody has ever gone, and there's aerial views, you'll find these structures that are more the traditional type. Currently, the more modern ones are either done for a commercial tourist, and I'll show you, I've got pictures of that, or it's become more popular to do them as a round building, but that's not the original. But it's basically the center of their community life. And the entire tribe, originally, they were housed in these. So most outsiders that see one for the first time, you would think maybe it's just a large thatched hut. Except large, it really doesn't cover it. A traditional Maloca can run up to 130 feet long or more, nearly 40 feet high. Now, you have to understand how it's constructed to achieve that is a major feat. So maybe to picture it in your mind, you could fit a decent sized commercial warehouse inside one. These are massive, and they're built without any metal. There's no nails or screws. There's no hardware at all to build these. The builders select dense jungle hardwoods that naturally resist rot and insects, so they last a long time. They bend structural arches from flexible green timber. The entire frame is bound together with jungle vines, soaked and flexible when they go on, but when they dry, they tighten up over time until the joints are just lock solid, is as good as any carpenter could do with modern tools. The roof is woven from palm leaves, but it's layered so densely it doesn't just shed rain, it's a major protectant. It also seals the interior against any kind of tropical downpour or virtually hurricane type winds. Inside this space, it's organized in a certain logic an architect would recognize immediately. The ground floor is for living, for cooking. There's a mid-level, and that's where they hang rafters, they'll cure meat, they'll store sacred objects. Now, the upper peak is left open for ventilation and light. The original design is most of the peak. Currently, you'll see it just like maybe in the round ones, it's just a big open in the center, or on some of their long houses and the more commercial ones, there'll just be a triangle opening at each end. I think it's important to separate what's being done in a modern way versus what the original was, because it gets to the heart of today's story. So that upper peak, it was left open for ventilation and light, but more about that in a minute. The perimeter is divided into private family compartments. So inside, it's private family compartments so that the whole community shares the structure. Each family has its own defined space in it. Now, let me show you, this will just be a few minutes, maybe half a minute of some pictures. And the first one I show you is one of those commercial buildings, although the dimensions are representative. So this is built for one of those tourist areas and built for tourists. Families aren't living in it. It's more of an exhibition. Here's a diagram of the round one. And this is more traditional. Of course, there's no drawings of the original traditional ones. But this gives you a sense of the scale of this thing, which, considering the tribes, you wouldn't think it would be possible, actually, if you've ever built a house and understand it, the more you span a distance, how much more difficult it becomes to actually build, and not only build, but to be as strong as they are. I mean, really, it's a masterpiece of engineering. And it's just, and it's very old. Some version, we look at all these stone pyramids and, it's like, ooh, ah, and yeah, well, they are. But if you know about building and working with wood, that you can look at a structure of this size and it's every bit as awe-inspiring. It's every bit of, how was that possible? Yeah, on a smaller scale, sure. But on that scale, how did they do it? So some version of the structure has been built in the Amazon for thousands of years. Now, we're getting to the part that really caught me. Many of the indigenous people of the Amazon carry oral traditions about a great flood. Now, this isn't unusual on its own. I mean, flood narratives exist in cultures all over the world. We all know that. Mesopotamia, of course, Greece, India, China, the Pacific Islands, all over Mesoamerica, the American Indians, for example. The widespread presence of these stories has been known forever. And there's various theories about why they exist so broadly, from shared ancient memory of a real catastrophic flooding to something more fundamental about how human beings process the idea of catastrophe. But there's specific detail in many of the Amazonian flood traditions that really caught my eye. The flood, in their accounts, was not simply a natural disaster. It wasn't just a flood. It was a moral event. The people who were destroyed by their oral tradition, the people who were destroyed because they were corrupt or wicked. The world had become an evil place, and the survivors were the ones that were judged worthy of continuing. And they had something that's in English is called the Creator. And after the waters receded, the survivors built this great communal structure, the first Maloka, specifically, as per the oral tradition, to reestablish order, to preserve the community's knowledge, its laws, its identity, and information for future generations. Their building design is an intentional time capsule. The instructions for the building, the original Maloka, in these oral traditions were given to the survivors directly by the Creator. A flood that destroys the wicked spares the few good people. Survivors given divine instructions for a structure designed to preserve life and community through catastrophe. A building whose proportions and purpose are sacred because they came from above. This is the oral tradition of the Amazon people who had no contact with the Near East or Hebrew scriptures, no contact with Mesopotamian flood narratives. They didn't know about Gilgamesh. They arrived at this through their own history, passed down word by word through generations of chants and ceremonial recitation. And that's the oldest and maybe the most reliable form of information that human beings have ever developed. It certainly has gone on far longer than books. So let me tell you what Genesis says about the Noah's Ark, because there's some comparisons here. And the details matter, and most people only remember the broad outline. God does not simply warn Noah that a flood is coming. He gives him specific engineering instructions, measurements, materials, a design, 3 levels, a lower deck, a second deck, and a third deck. Interior rooms. The original Hebrew described them as nests or cells, designed to partition the interior and distribute the structural load. A roof with a specific opening along the peak. Scholars interpret this as a continuous ventilation gap to provide air and light. The entire structure sealed against water with pitch, a natural resinous tar applied inside and out. Now I'm going to describe the traditional Maloka again, but this time through this lens. 3 functional levels. Interior rooms, the aposentos, 1 per family. It creates a cellular structure running the full perimeter of the building, distributing weight and providing social stability. A triangular skylight running along the peak of the roof, which functions as both ventilation shaft, and in the hands of the elders who know how to read it, it's oriented in such a way as it's a solar clock that tracks time and season by the angle of light that comes through. There's support pillars that operate internally as markers. A roof sealed against tropical rain with such provision that it functions like a resinous coat applied to the structure. Now, what I'm doing is asking a question I think is genuinely worth asking. Noah was not the only human being alive before the flood. We know that. And if the flood was a global event and that it covered the whole earth, then it stands to reason there were people scattered all across the planet at that time. There were people in places that would eventually become Africa and Asia and Europe and the Americas. The text of Genesis tells us what God said to Noah. It does not say that God spoke only to Noah. So here's the question. I just couldn't stop thinking it. What if he spoke to others? Now, the Amazon's not Mesopotamia. It's an entirely different world with different resources, different geography, different challenges. So if God is going to give survival instructions to people living in a vast river basin covered by endless forest, He would not tell them to go find gopher wood and build a ship. There is no gopher wood. The engineering problem is different. The solution would look different. So there's no record of how these tribes survived the flood. And I'm not saying that they did it in this building. However, this building almost seems to be an echo of something recorded and saved within the building itself. The original instructions are maybe the blueprint for this building. But underlying all this, build a structure large enough to preserve your community, your knowledge, your laws, your future generations, and build it according to the proportions and principles given to you by the Creator. That logic doesn't change based on geography. That's a universal answer to the problem of surviving catastrophe. And when I look at these people, what they built, and what they say about why they build it, and what they say about the instruction, where the instructions came from, I'm looking at something that carries the same logic in Amazonian form that Noah's Ark carries in its Mesopotamian form. Now, I can't prove the Amazon flood traditions and the construction of the Molucca are some ancient echo of the same event described in Genesis. I also can't prove they're not. What I can tell you is that the convergence of these specific details, the moral framing of the flood, that it was specifically for evil, the divine origin of the building instructions, that it came from the Creator, the structural parallels between the ark, the way it's described in Genesis, and the Molucca as it's actually built. I don't know, it really struck me, and I just can't blow it off as coincidence without at least wondering how there would be so many coincidences to this. Now, there's a theory that ancient flood narratives exist across so many cultures because human beings all tend to tell catastrophe stories the same way. And maybe that's partly true. But I have a hard time buying that when you add in some of the specifics of the moral aspects. Most natural disasters don't arrive with a judgment attached. You don't see a hurricane that only destroys the wicked and spares the righteous. You never heard a story like that. The moral framing in these traditions, that's not a generic feature of how humans talk about floods. It's a very particular claim about why this specific flood happened. And it shows up in traditions that had no contact with each other. It also has a harder time explaining the structural details. Now, if you're independently inventing a building for communal survival in the Amazon, you might arrive at many of the same engineering solutions the Molucca uses, because they're a logical answer to that environment, perhaps. But the 3-level division of vertical space specifically, not just grow into it, but specifically as the instructions, the cellular family compartments, the peak ventilation opening, the waterproofing, these are not, they're not the only solutions to some of these problems, but they're specific and they mirror the ark's design in ways that's more than superficial. The tribes who build Moluccas today are not thinking about Noah. They're keeping alive thousands of years old survival manual because the structure works, because the community needs it, because the elders say this is how it was always been done, this is why, and this is our direction. They're not making any argument about it. They're just building a house as the Creator instructed them. Two groups of people separated by an ocean and everything else. One built a ship, and after the fact, one built a specific house. And both were told to build something big enough to hold all of them, because the entire tribe lives in these buildings. Something sealed against the storm, something designed to carry life through the worst thing they'd ever seen. Maybe that's just what intelligent people do when they face the same problem. Or maybe at the beginning of things, we were all given the same answer in the language of the place where we happen to be standing. Now, I would love to know what you think about this. Am I just blowing something out of proportion? I mean, I'm giving you what I found in the research, but I can't help but be fascinated by this. How is this? This is too big of a coincidence, and it just makes you want to know. It just makes you wish you had a time capsule, because I want to know. Now, for a long time, people thought they called it the flood myth, except we now know it wasn't a myth, and there's proof all over the world about a flood at the same time in history, including in the United States. It's all over the place in the United States. So that's a known. So we know that it actually happened. It's no longer a myth. And we know that it was worldwide according to Genesis. And then we know it's worldwide according to the natural evidence that's there. We also know that, yeah, there was Adam and Eve, and then there was Cain and Abel, but then out of nowhere came wives and children. And when Cain went off, and after he was banished, he went into different there were different villages and there was all kinds of population out there. So it appears the Bible talks about the things that are important to the Bible, but there were populations out there. I remember a long time ago when I used to question an elder who is in a particular religion. I used to bring questions to him on Saturday. We would have hours of just debate. And one of the things I brought early on was, well, if you had Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and they got wives and they went out and fought, where did they come from? You know, it's like, that's a contradiction. Well, it's not a contradiction, actually. And so if that's the case, why couldn't there be people in the Amazon? And there's all kinds of evidence that there is. So I don't know. It blew me away. Well, one other thing that I'll mention, so I don't want to be misleading about anything. Those they call them cave paintings, but the wall paintings that you saw, there's a lot of confusion about what took place. And that last crew that went in determined that some of the paintings probably go back as far as 20,000 years. And there's reasons they think that. They think they were able to date, not on the wall itself, but over time, some of the stuff would flake off and it would carry that paint. And some fell into these little fire pits that were there and would get burned, and it caused this a chemical situation where they're able to measure those pieces. Nobody knows how accurate it is, but they think they have it somewhat accurate. And it says some go back as far as 20,000 years, but some appear to have been done maybe in the last few decades, which wouldn't be surprising if that's a place that tribes would move around and maybe once a year go there as whatever, and do a painting, go back to the tribe. So it appears that those paintings, it's not like it was all in one time period. It's been a continuous thing from many thousands of years ago until last week. I mean, they don't know, but some appears to be very fresh and current. So anyway, that's my story today. I'm very curious about what you think about it. Have I gone off the deep end? At the very least, you can see, because I get asked this a lot. It's like, you mentioned rabbit hole. What are you talking about? Well, I think people sometimes do this. For me, it's like an illness. So I'll read or hear about something and it piques my curiosity. And so I have to dig in on that. And then I have to dig in and it just keeps going. It keeps going. It begins with a park and then it comes to the painting and then it comes to what the paint was made of. And it just never seems to end. But very often it's gratifying. This one blew me away because it wasn't about the beginning. It was the treasure that I found at the end. And I was very excited to do this video. So anyway, that's all I got. I will be back Sunday for the 11 in the morning coffee time. Because Rumble is putting the heat on, they're requiring a lot more from me now. I will ask you, if you think this was interesting, to share it, do the likes, do all the things that I normally don't ask you, but recently I began. Sharing especially, because I'm on Rumble, it's not exposed to anywhere near as many people as when I was on YouTube. So if you find it interesting, feel free to share it. And with that, I will end it for today. I will see you Sunday. For those of you that were here, thank you for being here. I very much appreciate it. Ciao.
Okay.